Welcome back to Team O'Neill. What we're going to look at today is a quick roadside fix for one of the most common failures on vehicles, especially in rally and off-road racing: torn and ripped CV boots. So if you are driving hard, or maybe you're just driving an older vehicle, or you're driving off-road, this is something that you're going to see fairly commonly. The first thing you do when you pull a rally car into service is check out some of these boots, but it's also the first thing you can do if you pull your car in for an oil change or anything else like that, is examine what you've got going on here, because you've got this outer CV boot and this inner CV boot, the ball joint boot, a tie rod end boot, a sway bar link boot, an upper ball joint boot, even this little piece of plastic right here, which I'm now noticing is torn at the top. The job of all of these rubber boots is to basically keep grease in and or keep dirt and sand and debris out. So because this steering rack boot is torn, you're going to get sand and stuff in here in your inner tie rod end, which is expensive and painstaking to replace, but also eventually going to be a safety hazard. This CV boot is now going to be leaking grease. You can see as the wheel spins, it's been spinning grease out onto the sway bar and the control arm and all this other stuff. All this grease should be inside that boot, and also that dirt is getting in there. If you're looking to just patch this up real quick so you can get back on the road, the first thing you're going to want to do is just clean this whole area up pretty good. There's a couple reasons for that. One is just so you can really see what you're working with as far as damage. And two is if you do need to use any tape or adhesives, or you try and use anything in here, you've got to get some of that grease cleaned up because nothing's going to stick to it. If you're not familiar with what's inside that CV boot, there's essentially a bunch of balls being held in that high-strength steel cage. The whole idea is so that as that drive shaft turns, it obviously turns the wheel, and that can happen whether the suspension is going up and down, or your wheels are turning, or both. This one's been cleaned up for literally this demonstration purpose. Normally this would be full of grease, and you can imagine if that grease started getting out, this can build up temperature really quickly. And also if you did start getting any sand and debris inside here, this is going to wear out. And what happens is if this cage breaks and one of these balls escapes, this all just kind of grenades inside the cage eventually. It's with a four-wheel drive truck. That would probably take out your four-wheel drive because you've got an open front differential. And when you select four-wheel drive, it's just going to spin the garbled mess inside this boot instead of turning that tire. In a front-wheel drive car, if you lose a CV, most cars aren't going to drive at all unless you've got some kind of a really good limited slip or locked differential. Same thing in a rear-wheel drive car. If this were in the back and you lose a CV, if you've got an open differential vehicle, that car's going to be dead in the water. So now that you've got this area sort of cleaned up and you can see what you've got going on, before you try and seal this boot back up, try and get some grease back in there any way you can. If you've got a grease gun with some decent high temp grease, that's going to work great. There is actual CV boot grease that comes in little tubes. If you've got one of those, that's ideal. If you're in the side of the road, maybe you can get to a gas station or a parts store. Any clean grease, hopefully high temp grease, anything you can find, the more you can get in there, the better off you're going to be, because you've already lost, 50% at least of the grease that was in there. So replacing that any way you can with whatever you can find is going to be what you want to do. The nice thing about a grease gun is in a scenario like this, you can get it in here and then all the way in to where those balls in the crown are in here, where you really want the grease. You can sort of force it into that area and then move it around as much as you can and get grease to different parts of that CV joint. It's not going to be packed in there as well as you'd like if you could take it all apart and repack that whole unit. But it's a lot easier than trying to fumble grease in there with your hand. We've got this truck on the lift and we're going to replace this CV boot, so I'm not going to waste a whole tube of grease on it, but essentially get as much grease in there as you can. So now that we've got this cleaned up and repacked full of grease, the goal is going to be to try to seal that up as best as possible. And really, what you use to do that is just determined by what you might have available to you. One thing you will want to do is get the wheel basically straight when you try to patch it, or as straight as you can, so that whatever you put over there has a decent chance of staying on. If all you have is duct tape or electrical tape, go ahead and just tape the heck out of it. If you can find some plastic wrap, even just a trash bag, and cut it into sections, get some zip ties and get that over there. Basically anything you can do at this point that's going to help keep that grease inside and really keep the sand and dust and debris out, the longer this is going to last. We are of course in a fully stocked garage here, but in keeping with the goal of this video, I went rummaging through the trash can, and what I found is a plastic bag and then a heavier plastic bag. This would work. If all you could find was just even a shopping bag or some kind of plastic like this, the goal would be to wrap it around here as best as you absolutely could and get it nice and tight. And then a few zip ties would do the trick. If you had hose clamps, that's wonderful. If you had to tie it on there with parachute cord or your shoelaces, that's fine, go for it. Just because I found it, this is a much nicer, heavier duty plastic bag, which I'm going to cut open and wrap around there. If you had a bigger zip tie, you'd be a lot happier, but you can always just daisy chain them together. Come on now, get in there. Nice. So it's definitely not a work of art, but that's going to make a huge difference. If you needed to actually use this, you'd want to take a few minutes, get a few more zip ties, make this a little prettier, get it a little tighter on here, a little more snug, trim off the ends of the zip ties and that kind of thing. You want to make sure that as this turns, it doesn't rub or interfere on anything where it's close to the shock, especially if there's any wires or brake lines or anything like that, like this wheel speed sensor right here. But with a few more minutes and a few more zip ties, this would be definitely good to go, and you could use this to get where you needed to be. Anytime you pull a vehicle in, one of the first things you always do is take a look at all those different boots in the front end, and if any of them are ripped, replace them if you can, patch them up if you need to. If you're into these kinds of videos, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out teamoneil.com. You can take a variety of different driving courses up here at our campus in New Hampshire. Have fun, be safe, and we'll catch you next time.